Thanks, everybody. Hope you had a great lunch. So I'm Jamie McLaughlin. I am the founder of Three Pearls Charities and the president, and we do passion projects with the help of Neil Gerber Eisenberg, who supported this Tiger ID project and some other projects we're working on. My co-conspirators or co-panelists are Jeff Kremer and Noah Behrick. Jeff does freelance animal advocacy and conservation, and you can view him in the conservation game. And Noah is an AI developer expert, founder of ArcN, and he is going to be talking a little bit later about how we put this project together from a technical perspective, which thank goodness, because I don't know any of that. But I'm just going to be covering the easy stuff, the law. And the topic here is the Big Cat Public Safety Act. So this act actually is an amendment of the Captive Wildlife Safety Act and the Lacey Act amendments of 1981. And it's implemented under 50 CFR Part 14, Subpart K. And the purpose of this, the legislative intent behind the Big Cat Public Safety Act was to protect the public, to keep them from interacting physically with big cats, and also to promote welfare of big cats. The law was signed into effect on December 20th, 2022. And then there was some time for people to register their cats. So what it did is it made it illegal for people to just hold these cats privately. They had to go ahead and if they could be grandfathered in by registering their individual animals. They had to fill out a form, and they had 180 days from the signing of this to be able to register their cats. So cats had to be registered by 18th of June, 2023. A form had to be submitted for each cat, and towards the end of the presentation, I just have some screenshots of the form because I think it's kind of cool to look at those forms. As lawyers, sometimes we're focused on stuff and we might not look at like in detail at the actual form, and we can find a lot of stuff that's on forms that might inform how we can go about aiding with enforcement. There's also a lifetime record keeping requirement under this act. So each cat that's registered, you have to keep the registration for the lifetime of the cat, and then 5 years after the death or disposition of the cat as well. So the major prohibitions, of course, the registration is required, but this prohibits breeding and selling cats. Because you may be familiar with that show, The Tiger King, that kind of made this problem. It brought it to the public light. A lot of people didn't understand that when they do things like go to roadside zoos and get their picture taken with a tiger, what would happen to that tiger? Obviously, once the tiger grows up, it's not very good to take pictures with unless you want your face bit off. So they have to keep like breeding more tigers, and then they were ending up killing the tigers and stuff like that. So you can't breed them, but that includes whether it's intentional or negligent. So you have to have a propagation plan in place, which says this is how we're going to stop these cats from breeding if we're going to continue to possess them. Also, there can be no public contact with the cats. So that kind of gets rid of that whole getting your picture taken with a baby tiger situation. Authorized caregivers can interact with them, but if you are a member of the public, you can no longer interact with them. You have to have either a permanent barrier between you and the cat, or you have to have like 15 feet of space between you and the cat. Now, there are some different folks that can maintain cats. So first of all, the people that had cats in the first place that register their individual cats through the form that I mentioned, they can keep their cats. Those cats had to be owned by the date in December 2022 when the law went into effect. The other thing is there could have been a loophole, but luckily they were thinking ahead, and if you had a pregnant cat and baby kittens in your utero, those kittens could be registered, but they looked at the gestation periods of the different species that were going to be covered under this act, and they said, okay, well, we can tell like if your cats are born like 6 months after this went into effect, that obviously you bred those cats after it went into effect. So other folks can still have cats. So anybody who has a USD APHIS Class C license, states, colleges, state universities, state agencies, and state licensed vets, qualifying wildlife sanctuaries, and people that are transporting the animals. But They can't have any ownership interest in the animal. They just have to be transporting the animal for the sake of transport. So who is covered under the Big Cat Public Safety Act? There are 8 prohibited wildlife species included: lions, tigers, jaguars, cheetahs, cougars, and then leopards. So snow leopards and clouded leopards are also included. And because it's after lunch, we have to have a quiz. So read the 2 questions here, and I know lawyers always like to be right and shout out their answers, but be quiet. You're not going to be graded, so that's good, but then also there's no prize. So what species is Napoleon Dynamite's favorite non-human animal? Follow-up question. Is Napoleon Dynamite's favorite non-human animal covered under the Big Cat Public Safety Act? Question. I should have done a pre-question. Okay.
What are you drawing?
A liger.
What's a liger?
It's pretty much my favorite animal. It's like a lion and a tiger mixed. Bred for its skills and magic.
Okay, so the answer is liger. Now you know. Which is an unnatural hybrid of a male lion and a female tiger. Tiglons are also included there. So the Big Cat Public Safety Act doesn't just include the 8 species. It includes hybrids thereof, which is very important because these types of animals, they're unnatural, but they bring in a lot of people that want to look at these animals in roadside zoos. So they're like a big money maker. So, thanks to Napoleon Dynamite and this presentation, you will always remember that hybrids included. You're welcome. Okay, so there are significant penalties to breaking the law under the Big Cat Public Safety Act. So there are civil penalties and fines that can be levied by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. This summer, it was August, they adjusted those penalties for inflation, so those have been increased. There can also be criminal fines and imprisonment, and then there is the potential for them to confiscate your cat, so you would have to forfeit cats if you break the law. But when we look at this, what is the practical effect? How does it impact these backyard breeders or roadside zoo people? Well, the Congressional Budget Office did a report to see what it would mean to the public and to the government financially if this went into effect. And of course it did, but they estimated that the breeding ban was not going to cost these exhibitors a lot of money. It's like $1.6 million a year from selling cats between breeders. But importantly, not having any contact with the public was really going to hit them where it counts, which is their wallet. So $80 million is made annually off of interacting with big cats at these roadside zoos. And it's pretty interesting. It's really a short publication, and I linked it there if you want to take a look at it. So in the U.S., this has been in effect for a couple of years now, but there's only been 2 cases prosecuted, unfortunately. Jeff's going to touch on them a little bit with some inside baseball because this is the kind of stuff he does. One of the cases, the Arkansas case, was a tiger cub case, and the other case in Texas was smuggling a jaguar, I believe. So we're going to talk about that. But you might wonder, why is the Big Cat Public Safety Act even important? Why do we want to prosecute this? Is it just to prevent animal welfare violations? Is it just to protect the public? Well, it's really important that we pay attention to this and prioritize it because these types of crimes are not an offender's only crime or first crime often. A lot of wildlife crimes and mistreatment of animals and abuse, like we talked about the link earlier, those things go hand in hand with other types of crimes. And so this is a skinny lion. I don't know if it needed a trigger warning or not. It's not too bad of a picture. But there was a case that was in Oregon, and some of you might know about this. It was the West Coast Game Park Safari case. So this guy had over 300 different animals, and there were a lot of animal welfare violations. I think there were over 80 violations of USDA APHIS, wrote them up over just 2 years. And animal carcasses, dead tiger in the, frozen tiger in the freezer. Yeah, so a lot of stuff. But then when the authorities went in there to seize the animals, they were looking at a lot of other issues too, because they were aware that other criminal activity was happening. And during that raid, they found 80 grams of methamphetamine, which is considered a dealer amount of meth. 8 grams of cocaine, 44 guns, one of which was modified to be used as a machine gun, and $1.6 million of cash and certificates hidden, money laundering stuff. So even though this wasn't a Big Cat Public Safety Act case, this is a cruelty case, animal welfare enforcement by USDA, APHIS, and then other agencies that stepped in for these other crimes. I'm just highlighting it to make anybody that's listening realize that we're not here just talking about animals and what's happening to animals. You know, there was there was actually really a good podcast about this on the Evergreen, which is put out by Oregon Public Broadcasting. It's like a short podcast, but in that podcast, they even mentioned that the guy that ran this place, he was threatening to his employees, and he raised his hand to slap one of them and lots of stuff. So if people don't have respect for animals, it's likely that they don't have respect for other people either. So keep that in mind. So if enforcement is an issue and Fish and Wildlife Service can't keep up with the enforcement, what can we do as lawyers and experts to think outside of the box to look for ways to aid them in doing that? And I'm going to talk about the life cycle of this idea in another slide, but basically we can use AI technologies in a lot of ways. They don't have to be only in legal practice or only like for certain uses. Use the skills and knowledge that you have to connect the dots between issues that other people might not recognize. So what we're looking here is identifying individual animals using AI so that we can track those individual animals and show Fish and Wildlife Service whether they're being trafficked or where they're ending up or whether they're even dead or alive. So AI can sort through thousands of pictures, and Noah's going to talk a little bit more about that. We can also look at other data that might be in those images, like the image data, find out the location or when that picture was taken, and compare that to see, has this cat lost 100 pounds? Is it underweight? Is it malnourished? There's so many things that we can do, and AI can help us sort that out. So this is the form that I mentioned earlier from the Office of Management and Budget. This is the form that people that owned big cats needed to complete within the 180-day period to be able to maintain their cats. You can see some of the stuff on here, genus, species, description. So that included eye color, scars, ear tags, physical location, protocols to prevent breeding. This had to be done for every single cat. So if you have like 55 tigers, like some people we know, you have to fill out 55 forms. But what really excited me in a very nerdy lawyer way was Section B, Part 1, Section B, which said that along with this application, you had to provide photographs of the front and profile of each big cat. So that would help if you want photographic data to be able to identify an individual cat by looking at their spots or their stripes or whatever you're looking at. You can use those pictures. So of course, because I love FOIA so much, I submitted a Freedom of Information request to get copies of all of this. Unfortunately, it has not come back yet. It went to the black hole. But I'm thinking, when the government is functioning again, I might get some data. And until then, we had some other alternate sources that we used to gather data. Lastly, I just want to touch on the life cycle of this idea, because I didn't just like come to me all at once. I have watched The Conservation Game, which is a documentary that covers trafficking of big cats, and Jeff actually stars in it. And then I wasn't thinking about AI at the time. And then earlier this year, Jeff was talking at an American Bar Association event, and he was talking about how difficult it was and how few cases there were being prosecuted by Fish and Wildlife under the Big Cat Public Safety Act. And I thought, I'm going to go watch that movie again. So then I watched it, and then I saw you going through all of these pictures, and I'm like, oh, that sucks. And I bet AI could do that like really, really fast.
Yeah.
And then I went to AI for animals at UC Berkeley with Shankalpa as one of the organizers, so thank you for that. And there I met Noah, and we started talking about some stuff. And then, of course, I go home and I think about it some more. And then I reached out to Jeff and I reached out to Noah, and they volunteered their time to help. And then the attorneys at Neil Gerber Eisenberg stepped in, and then I said, hey, Kathy and Joan, I have this crazy idea. And they're like, yeah, let's try. And so here we are. So we're going to be talking more about the Big Cat Public Safety Act, and then also Noah's going to focus on how he has put the proof of concept together that we're going to be further developing during our hackathon, which is on Sunday. So, Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Jamie.
Sure.
One of my 65-year-old readers.
I'm lucky I can read anything.
Well, I first wanted to echo my sincere appreciation to GW University and all the individuals that have helped make this empowering conference possible and help facilitate it. It's a privilege to be able to collaborate with like minds that want to make a positive difference in the lives of our sentient animal friends. So I thought I'd just jump right into my presentation because it involves my evolution in the animal welfare world as part of the content of the presentation. So the types of facilities we're going to find exotic species of animals held captive in the United States. The first, one of the largest, would be the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. Those would be at AZA accredited zoos. They consider themselves the national one's closed down right now due to the stoppage, but they consider themselves a self-touted gold standard. And a little personal tie, both my wife and I, after 20 plus years in the corporate world, both decided we wanted to align our careers more focused on our desire to make a positive difference in the lives of animals. So we both at the time went to work for our AZA accredited zoo in the Tampa Bay area where I had been born and raised. And it was over the course of the 4 years there that we learned that there's two sides to all zoological institutions. There's the operation side, which is the business side, the money-making side, and the animal caretaking side. And we worked for both sides. I worked my way up into management from security to managing a couple of departments. But what we learned over the 4 years is that when the two sides butted heads, generally the operations or the business side won the battle. So we learned there was a compromise of animal welfare within those organizations. The second type of facility that we're going to find exotic species of animals in captivity in the U.S. will be at a ZAA accredited zoo, and that's the Zoological Association of America. They're newer to the game. When we were working at our AZA accredited zoo in Tampa, our CEO of an AZA accredited zoo was serving on the board of the ZAA that had just formed and was allowing their organization to use our administrative offices and mailing address for the ZAA for their operational purposes. So the tentacles go far back. ZAA accredited facilities are going to be much smaller. They're privately owned oftentimes. The second takeaway that I find a little disheartening is that over the last several years, the ZAA has begun dual accreditation of a small number of AZA accredited zoos. And while on the surface it might not look dangerous, what it does in the public's eye is that it totally brings them up to speed, makes it in the public eye look like their ZAA accredited facility has the same policies, procedures, and standards, that gold standard, that the ZAA. And it could be farther from the truth. The standards of the AZA are going to be much higher than that of the ZAA, but by doing that dual accreditation, all of a sudden in the public's eye, they're not going to know who to go to because they're dual accredited. The third, I consider the best body of accreditation will be at a GFAS accredited sanctuary. So following our tenure in the zoological world, my wife and I, we learned the hard line between the business and the animal caretaking, so we pivoted again and went to work for the Big Cat Rescue, a GFAS accredited sanctuary in Tampa, Florida. And GFAS, Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries, is the only global entity that is focused on the accreditation of legitimate sanctuaries. So anybody can call themselves a zoo, a sanctuary, you can call yourself anything you want, but to be a legitimate sanctuary, the definition, the cornerstones are you don't breed, number one, you don't buy, you don't sell, and you don't allow the public to engage in hands-on contact with any of the animals in your collection. So that's, if you want to vet, I'm not a believer anymore in the concept of captive conservation being the answer. But if you're going to see, if you want to see exotic animals in captivity, the first place to start is go to GFAS. They have a search feature, and they have over 200 facilities around the world of different species that you can go to an accredited sanctuary and see how it's done. So the next category, and I've got the infamous twice convicted felon Doc Antle up here. Unaccredited roadside zoos, that's going to be the largest collection of facilities that we see exotic species of animals in the United States, estimated to be over 3,000 roadside zoos, and that it varies in size. So they can be licensed by the USDA, but they are not accredited by the AZA, ZEA, or any legitimate accreditation body. They can range in size, the small ones, the mom and pops where they have the zoo to you, they have a collection of exotic animals. They bring them to your library, they bring them to your school, they bring them to your private home, and you get to have hands-on photo encounters with whatever species they bring out. And I should note that those species can include everything from the small primates to the small felids. And when we talk about ambassador animals a little later, I'll expand upon that. But the largest facility, unaccredited roadside zoo left in the United States is going to be Doc Antle's Myrtle Beach Safari in South Carolina. While he's in federal prison, serving charges of animal welfare violations, money laundering, tag on to Jamie's, money laundering with ties to human trafficking. So these crimes aren't just about animals. These crimes are about financial, they're drug crimes, they're this broad spectrum. So they're probably the largest unaccredited roadside zoo left in the United States. And then the last category of facilities that we'll see exotic species of animals in captivity is going to be the circuses, traveling circuses. And I know a lot of people, a large portion of the public probably thinks that once Ringling decided to pivot and go to the human route, which is a great evolution in the animal welfare world, there still are a large number of medium-sized circuses still taking their roadshow of exploitation around the country, and there's a list of them there, and those are actual pictures from this current year. So following my tenure in the sanctuary world, then I was invited to help co-produce and star in a investigative documentary titled The Conservation Game. So for generations, celebrity conservationists such as Jack Hanna, Dave Salmani from Canada, Boone Smith, Jared Miller, and the Irwin family have led the public into believing that the exotic animals we see on TV, to include lions, tigers, and leopards, and primates, served as part of legitimate conservation initiatives. Well, what if the narratives that these individuals had espoused for decades on The Tonight Show, Good Morning America, and private events, what if those had been, in fact, lies? What if these individuals that the public has held in such high esteem within the animal welfare world had, in fact, betrayed us? So led by award-winning filmmaker Michael Weber, The Conservation Game takes us on a journey that exposes some of the nation's most celebrated and recognized celebrity conservationists, and exposes their complicity in the seedy exotic animal trade. And I'm proud to say that following the recent release of our film, all but one of the exploiters that we called out in the film, all but one have been put out of business. Tracking the cats, as Jamie talked, it's critical. It was like a light bulb went off when she presented this opportunity to work with Noah and his team of AI coders. Because Michael Weber, the producer director of the film, and I spent the better part of 2 years. It took us 4 years to produce the documentary with a small team. And 2 of those years, he and I tracked these cats by tracking tiger stripes and leopard spots. So leopard spots and tiger stripes are just like our fingerprints. If you have them on a cub when they're little, you can track that cub the entire life, and it's going to be the same fingerprint, the same spot or stripe when they're adult. And that's how we tracked the exploiters and their cats throughout the film. So being able to, I'd much like not have to spend 2 years doing this manually and have an AI program where I can plug in all the photo content and video content and help put these exploiters and these traffickers out of business. So as part of our film, you'll see part of the evolution of the Big Cat Public Safety Act. And it was a collaboration of a number of really highly recognized animal welfare groups across the country, including Big Cat Rescue in Tampa. It took over 10 years to get this bill through Washington. And the key components, as Jamie touched on, is that it prohibits private ownership of the exotic species of cats that she mentioned, including the hybrids. She also mentioned that it prohibits public contact, and that was probably the most critical part of it, because as she mentioned about the photo ops, we called it pay to play. So you could go and you could cuddle with a baby tiger cub or a lion cub or any of those leopard cubs, and you take your picture. And the public didn't think to ask, well, when I go back next year to the state fair or to that special event, where did that baby cub go? Well, that's, when the cubs become about 12 weeks or older, they're too dangerous or too large to have interaction with, so they generally were surplused or euthanized, and then that nefarious individual or organization then just bred more cubs. So it led to a never-ending cycle of breeding big cats in our country, and that's why we ended up with more tigers in our country than all of the world left in the wild. I mean, it's just profound, but there was the pay-to-play that was driving that business. So the Big Cat Public Safety Act stopped the private ownership, and it stopped the pay-to-play, which I think is one of the most critical components of the bill. Tag on to Jamie's comment about the two cases. I've been following it. I'm blessed to be retired from the animal welfare world. So in my retirement, I spend 7 days a week trying to look for the traffickers, look for the people violating the act. The two cases that were prosecuted, and I'll note that the pictures up here are not of the two cats that were in the cases. These are actually of cases that complaints I've submitted to U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Those are active cases. But in the two cases that have been prosecuted, one was actually his husband and wife out in Texas. They sold a margay to a private individual in a parking lot of a sporting goods store. And then the next month, they attempted to sell a jaguar cub, and the husband told the wife, bring a case of money to the transaction. She got pulled over for a traffic violation, and the whole deal went down. So while they were able to confiscate the cub, they didn't change hands. The second one was a gentleman in Arkansas, drove to Texas, purchased a tiger cub from an exotic animal broker, and drove it back to Arkansas. And then authorities were notified that, hey, there's a tiger cub running around somebody's backyard. And at the same time, authorities were notified that somebody was trying to sell that tiger cub on the internet. So that's when authorities stepped in, were able to confiscate the tiger cub, shut the deal down. And as you can see, the fines and sentences weren't overly significant, but in the animal welfare world, any prosecution is significant. So ongoing, I'm continuing to work with both federal and state officials. I'm really good at forensic research. So that's the case in Miami. That's a photo. This is, God, it just blows me away. This is in Miami. It's called Everglades Exotics, and that is legal in Florida. Now, the federal case is a violation of the Big Cat Public Safety Act, is still being investigated, but I just touched base with the state wildlife officer 2 weeks ago that invested this case, and the complaint I filed in Florida, 2 people holding those 2 chains, that suffices to Florida law to allow that. And there's a couple was getting engaged, and the gentleman sitting down next to the line. That's legal in Florida, and it meets Florida Fish FWC state guidelines. So I submitted over 10 cases, complaints to Fish and Wildlife. I've been able to confirm that there's a number of active ones, and I'm happy to talk in the Q&As about the specifics of the cases. I've also worked with Texas state officials in helping track a tiger cub through the stripes that I hope to use AI pretty soon, of the Mexican cartel smuggling a tiger cub into Texas. The outcomes and challenges, it's lack of resources, right? In today's political environment, I've got a federal investigative agent that's working with me now. He's sharp as a whip. He helped prosecute Joe Exotic, and he's making sure my complaints get to the right regional investigator to make sure they take action. And he's incredible. At the other end of the spectrum, I've worked with state and federal officials that have said, I've heard about the Big Cat Public Safety Act, but I don't know much about it. So it's a lack of education, and that's not a problem, right? We went into this knowing that I'm sure those of you in the legal profession know there's a big difference between enacting a piece of legislation and enforcing it. So we're here to be a part of that solution along with everybody here today. So on behalf of myself and everybody that's like-minded, there's the positive news is I remain a firm believer in the fact that collectively we surely will not be denied or defeated in seeking to be the voice for our sentient animal friends that can't speak for themselves. So I look forward I'll be around for the entire conference. If you want to collaborate, chat, tug my elbow, I'd love to hear from you and be part of the solution. So thanks again to GW University, everybody that's put this together, and looking forward to Noah's presentation and a good Q&A afterwards. So thank you very much.
close this one down so you can look
Okay.
yours, right?
I wonder if I can just share. That's not
I
turned
think we
on.
have to stop sharing on here, yeah.
Hello, everybody. Very excited to be here speaking on this topic. So I've taken a lot of what Jamie and Jeff have told me about this issue and tried to come up with a solution for solving it. I mentioned a lot of issues with scanning through thousands of photos and trying to track a tiger or a leopard across different ages and locations. And so I took that, looked at several different papers and models that already existed, which I'll speak to in a minute, and tried to come up with a platform that would enable them to launch investigations really easily. So this is both about the vision language side of, or the vision side of things, trying to detect these differences between the tigers, but also in an application that enables you to actually execute on that information. So I will say I had some issues with connecting to the models, so I may not be able to demo everything that I wanted to today. I'm sure that'll be worked out by the time the hackathon commences. Here we have the homepage for this application, where you can see there's kind of a few investigations that are going on, some that are active, some may be canceled or in a different state. You can track how many investigations are ongoing through this dashboard here. For example, you see I have a couple of test investigations that are either active or canceled, whether they've been completed, verified, or what have you. I also have a list of facilities I'll show you that Jeff provided me. And so in this view, you can see by different locations where these incidents are occurring. The data set that I have loaded in here has about 1,800 tigers present. There are a load more tiger images than that, of course, and many more tigers besides. Some more breakdown of the facilities that we have in the platform currently, and they can be added later, and how many tigers are at these facilities. A couple of performance metrics that I was using to test, not too important here. Here is the main functionality of the application. It rests in this launch investigation page. So I won't be able to demo it for you, as you see. It says, you're bad at coding, you should be better. But I promise I will be better by the hackathon. So what you're intended to do here is I have a bunch of different tools that you can use individually in these tabs for searching, reverse image searching, monitoring the news automatically, generating some more leads, or even a relationship analysis between different facilities or different tigers. I have a model testing tab where you can kind of see the different models that I'm making use of. I'll talk about that a little more, like I said. But you should be able to have your database, pick specific tigers or facilities you want in natural language, then use any of these tools to search the web for relevant information. You'll notice I also have YouTube and Facebook APIs integrated. These are optional. I know that they have terms of use that kind of prohibit the use of these for anything in production or enterprise. However, you can use them for research, totally fine. So they're included just in case you would like to, but you would select a few of these tools, prompt the chatbot, and then it would start an investigation workflow. And it kind of walks you through some more information you might need or whatever else you think should be provided to it. There's an option to upload different documents as well, like specific laws for certain states, this sort of thing, and then that is provided for context. You're able to upload different tiger images here, right? So I have some tigers from, as I referred to earlier. These confidence scores are made up, please ignore them. And this is where the repository of images is kept that is then scanned by these vision models. Here's the list of facilities if you just wanted to look more closely at them as individuals, and we have links to quite a lot of them, including their various sites. So this data is provided to that agentic system that I showed before. Jumping out of the application, these are all of the models that I'm using. So I have papers for these as well. I'm just going to click through real quick. I'm sorry I'm bad at presenting, but it is what it is. You have to live with it. So there's already been quite a few models developed for re-identification of tigers and other species. This paper was a huge inspiration for me, and even where I found the data set for the tigers I do have. They were able to identify 19 or so different tigers in the wild, and then re-identify them later when they're in a different location. And so that formed a really good basis for what I was building. Of course, we need a lot more tiger images to accomplish what we're trying to. There's another paper here about doing this on edge devices, which is really great for this, but also great for another project we're working on later on, and so on. I do want to point out this OmniVinci model. This model is used for video, text, and images, so it's able to reason over any videos you upload. The YouTube API that I showed earlier being used, this is the model that's going to read or watch all of those videos and be able to tell if it corresponds to the original tiger. I have this set up in a repository that's going to be open sourced and available for people at the hackathon. And what I aim to do with this is not just develop a system that can detect tigers, leopards, and other large cats across different times and spaces, but other animals like horses, chickens, etc. Maybe not chickens. And overall arrive at a platform that allows you to re-identify any animal you so choose that is subject to any law, even beyond the Big Cat Act. I know that was pretty quick, so I will talk about where I see this going in the future. I think for the hackathon this weekend, we're going to be aiming to expand the animals. So right now I have a lot of the tiger stuff figured out, but jaguars are next on the list as being the most trafficked, or it might be leopards. Leopards or jaguars, either way, all of the cats will eventually need to be integrated into the system. That's going to be one of the projects for the hackathon. And several other ideas I'm sure will arise, one being horses. Jamie would know more about this than I do, but there is some horse overpopulation issues around the country, and there's an issue where people have to go on foot to track down these horses and potentially give them birth control or guide them to be relocated if needed. Very strenuous process, much like searching through thousands of tiger images. And we aim to use a re-identification system there as well to provide darts of birth control via drones. Overall, I hope that gives a good idea of what I was trying to accomplish. There are some kinks to work out, but we're much further along in some ways and much further back in some others than I hope to be today. Thank you all so much. I believe I will hand it over to Jamie to finish this conversation.
There we go. So we're way ahead of time. So we're gonna open it up to Q&A online, and here in the audience.
Thank you all for what you're doing. It's great to see a sort of practical project that can do it. So like right on. Maybe this is for Jeff and then all the way through, which is, you got the Big Cat Safety Act passed. It's been 3 years. And, maybe there's a version where you have a tool that just can do the work you do 7 days a week, right? And just scouring.
Where were you?
You can imagine sort of just automated forensics. Tracking. So let's say you had that. Let's just snap our fingers and do it. What does it look like? What's the impact? How do we get to a place where we totally win?
Yeah, great question. So I think even the legal profession, you don't want to spend your time prosecuting. You'd like to see change in behavior. And within the animal welfare world, that's what we hope the laws do. And we hope that these tools do as well. So following passage of the Big Cat Public Safety Act, I've seen a significant decrease in the number of nefarious people or individuals that are exploiting the big cats. I've also seen a change in behavior following the release of our film. There's a big industry. I talked about AZA, ZAA, and roadside zoos, and while there's a vast difference in the standards and practices and policies, there's one commonality that is exactly the same that all of those facilities take advantage of, and that's ambassador animals. And that's one of my specialties. And so whether it be a reptile or a small cat or a small primate, they're being exploited across the country as educational animals. They call them ambassador animals. They're purposely bred, purposely human imprinted, and then exploited in the pseudonym of education. But what I've seen within the zoo world is that they're exploiting far fewer cats, far fewer primates. But what I've seen the roadside zoos do is take up a whole plethora of species that they're taking advantage of. So in our country right now, while there's not an issue with big cat ownership, there is an issue with small primate ownership. And so I mean, there is not a week that goes by that I don't document somebody's pet monkey getting away from it, or pet lemur or something getting away from it. Just last week for Halloween, a pet monkey in diapers got away from its owner at a Halloween store in Texas. And we keep going back to Texas because Texas and Florida have some of the highest rates of exotic animal ownership. But there's a great bill that's trying to make its way back through Washington. It's called the Captive Primate Safety Act. I'd encourage everybody to get behind it, get on board. You can contact your legislative representatives automatically through the Humane World for Animals or a number of IDA or IFAW. They all have petitions set up where you can just type in your address, it pulls up your legislators, and you fill out the petition, and it sends it. We've got to get that bill through. In a nutshell, it'll accomplish the same thing for primates that the Big Cat Public Safety Act accomplished for the big cats. So what I'd like to say is I'd like to see a change in behavior. So we've seen an immediate change in behavior with the number of people or organizations exploiting the cats. We need to keep we need to keep the momentum out there, keep the pressure on them. And I think tools like this, it's like I don't want to have to catch a bunch of people. I want them to fear that tool. It'll be a great resource for me to use, but I don't want to have to then turn it over to a prosecutor that doesn't have time to prosecute that case. I want those exploiters to be fearful that we're on their trail. And then again, we see the behavior change. So I think it's just an incredible weapon. I was talking with a U.S. Fish and Wildlife, we were talking on a conference call, and he says, can you make that an app that my field agents can use? And I don't know if it was Noah was saying, well, that's not on this project, but yeah, I can see us growing that. Because his field agents need to make split-minute decisions. They're out at a horrible, West Coast Game Park Safari, who I had the privilege of helping take down. I've documented them for over 10 years, and they were originally exploiting just a beautiful black jaguar cub, and just beautiful animal. That black jaguar cub was confiscated along with the 300 other animals and is now at an accredited sanctuary. So it's that collaborative teamwork in keeping the pressure on the exploiters. And when Noah came along, man, this is gonna be a game changer. It really will. And like his vision is, I brought up the idea if we could use an app that would if we can just take a photo or a video and plug it into an app, an AI app like this, and it could tell the general public, is it real or fake, right? Because there's so much AI going around that the general public just doesn't know if that's a real primate. There was a case a couple of weeks ago where there's a chimpanzee driving down the road on a Vespa that somebody said got away from the Indianapolis Zoo. Now, I could tell it wasn't real, but it was about 80% real. And I'm sure that most of the general public would probably take that as being real. And I've got an example. If somebody wants to stop after the Q&As, I've got a picture that AI turned into a 3-second video clip from our own, we have a canine behaviorist working with us, and she took a picture of 2 of our dogs with a stuffed animal. And that stuffed animal by AI looks 100% real, moving and all. So AI is going to be a scary thing, and we're going to need tools like this to better protect the welfare of animals. So great question.
Thank you all for your presentations. I'm curious as to your thoughts on how practical and if it's even possible to put together some kind of registry for animal welfare offenders or people who are prosecuted for cruelty, how possible it would be to put together some kind of system like that, and if you would even see it as beneficial.
I think that that's an interesting idea. I'll also say that you can get a lot of this information through USDA APHIS, because when these facilities have any violation or anything that's going on with them, you can go on there and see that. Now, previously, 2 administrations ago, a lot of that information was removed from the internet, but it's back up. So that could be one place to start to create some sort of list or database, because the information is there. Like we were talking about, West Coast Game Park Safari had like 80 violations in 2 years. And then I think like 8 of those were significant violations, critical violations. So the data is there. It's just, do we have more like collaboration between interdisciplinary practices like law and AI and all of this stuff to like put these things together? And that's why you're here, and that's why I hope people are watching, because we all work in a silo sometimes, and we need to think outside of the box and work together to use our separate, distinct skill sets to come up with new, novel ideas in order to solve some of these problems or help other agencies solve the problems if we're not able to do it, or bring a cause of action, for animals that don't have standing. So, but good question. Thank you.
Yeah, and just to tag on, so there's great search tools. I mean, it's buyer beware. So APHIS USDA search tool, just type that in, and you can, and I go there every week to look. You search through all the inspection records and the critical violations, and it'll bring up all the USDA licensees, and you can search by institution number, name, and I pull up all the inspection records looking for violations, including the critical ones. Born Free also has it's an exotic animal, I think it's an exotic animal incident database that they launched last year. And you go there and you can break it down by species, by date, by anything else. So, and they keep up with it pretty well as well.
I have a couple of questions, actually. Thank you all. In regards to the 2 years of critical violations, how does that happen? Is it just lack of resources? Is it not enough? How does that happen so that it doesn't continue to happen?
It's just lack of enforcement generally from a lot of these agencies. They're overwhelmed, and somebody was talking earlier about how many facilities, like
Like 1 for 500, right? You have 1 inspector for 500.
Yeah, so it's just an impossible task for them, no matter how much they care and want to do a good job. So it's not necessarily on USDA APHIS for not doing that. It's just that this is overwhelming, and as a society, we have to decide what we care about and where we want to put our resources, which is why we were talking about the link and the other things that go along with these crimes for animals, against animals. It's not just, there's always other, there's, weapons and all of this different stuff, meth, all of that fun
Murder for
stuff.
hire.
Murder for hire is always a good one. But yeah.
No, and the facility I work for, Joe Exotic isn't in jail primarily because of his animal welfare violations. He's in jail because it was a murder for hire plot against the founder that I work for. And so these people are insidious, and we almost single-handedly shut him down, but it wasn't through animal welfare violations, it was through other type of violations. And to tag on to Jamie, USDA is overtaxed, and the inspectors that I'm running into, that I have correspondence with, it's just like we're all human beings. We all have different attributes, right? So some are really good and some are really not good. And so like how Doc Antle, twice convicted felon in prison with Joe Exotic, can still have his deplorable roadside zoo still open. And if you go to his USD license, he has 0 infractions, 0 violations forever. So it's not possible, right? It's absolutely not possible. Having worked in the zoo world and the sanctuary world, a good inspector will write you up if your fence is 3 inches too low. So the fact that we've worked with inspectors, that there's good ones and there's not so good ones.
Yeah, and just, to mention the human trafficking component of that, I just feel like this is another point where, as animal law attorneys, we have to be very cognizant of all the other laws that these people are breaking and see how we can work with other groups to, get them like Al Capone for tax evasion or like whatever we can do.
Well, Doc Antle got sentenced to 13 months in prison, and it's taken decades to get him there, right? And so his convictions were animal welfare related, but the other, I think, more telling tale was that the money laundering, so he had human traffickers that were money laundering $500,000 through his roadside zoo. They give him the $500,000, he laundered it, he got a percentage back, and that's the main reason he's in prison. It's not because of the animal welfare violation. So you have to look at every angle to go after these exploiters, because it's going to take every angle to put them behind bars.
Thank you. And then my next question, because of the Big Cat Public Safety Act, we've seen this small cat crisis and an influx of them, inundating these sanctuaries and whatnot. Is there something being done in that regard for more legislation at this point? No.
Yeah, so they call it the small cat crisis now, because you'll have African servals, you'll have bobcats, lynx, you'll have the hybrids, you'll have the savanna cats, F1 through F5. They say generation 1 through generation 5. If you just type in savanna cat on the internet, I mean, it's a sad reality that people like different, right? And people pay for different. So just like with the small primates, I mean, these people are paying $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 per hybrid or per small primate just to have something different. So the 2 driving factors in my entire 30 years in my career have been the same 2 factors driving the industry, and that is ego and money, and that will never change, or a combination of both. That's what drives the exotic animal industry. And the exotic animal industry worldwide is estimated, and that's from reptiles to primates to cats, is estimated to be at least $20 billion annually. And the people within the animal welfare community believe that if they're estimating 20 billion, it's probably 40 billion. It's a money-driven industry. It's all about exploitation.
Maybe we should take a couple online ones.
Oh, sorry. Okay. All right, regarding the idea of a registry, how many of the non-legitimate facilities present themselves as sanctuaries, and can an entity such as Charity Navigator, et cetera, be a source of do not support information? So I don't know what Charity Navigator's
Yes.
rules are.
I don't think there is a rule.
Oh, there's
not
not?
much of a rule.
Okay, go ahead.
But Charity Navigator, if you're looking to donate to a worthy cause, Charity Navigator is the Bible of a place to vet that charity. They break the organization down. They tell you where the money's going. It's a pie chart. It's rated 0 to 4 stars, and that tells you the worthiness of most legitimate charities. These deplorable roadside zoos are not going to be either. They don't have to be rated by anybody. So people will make donations because they're not listed there, and the facility will say, well, we're not rated because we aren't big enough, or we don't have to be rated. So it's a great organization, but there's more non-legitimate than there are legitimate, for sure.
And just to reiterate what you already said earlier, Jeff, is for those people watching, don't forget that, like, if you're going someplace and you're interacting with an animal and having some sort of animal encounter, that is not legitimate. Right. Places don't let you do that. So any place that you're doing that, whether it's a photo op with a sloth or a small primate or whatever it is, you shouldn't be supporting that organization. That is a red flag. Yeah, don't swim with dolphins either. Swim with robot dolphins instead.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because, again, we talk about degrees. We talk about degrees of qualities of zoos, AZA, ZAA, roadside zoos. But again, going back to the ambassador animals, I mean, here's the gold standard of the industry, the AZA, right? And they are one of the worst offenders when it comes to marine mammals. You can have encounters with dolphins, you can have encounters with beluga whales, in pool swim encounters, kiss them on the snout, with seals, sea lions, and they have facilities accredited around the world, and most of the ones that are outside the United States are aquariums, but they are one of the worst offenders when it comes to marine mammal wildlife violations. And I don't understand as a gold standard how they benefit from that, right? They have almost 240 organizations. How does it benefit 15 of them if they're exploiting marine mammals, right? So it's all about profitability, and there has to be some politics in there, because there's no reason they as an organization would allow 15 or 20 organizations to tarnish the reputation of 235 others.
Okay, we have a couple more online questions. Oh, no, Julie, go. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is actually kind of a follow-on to what Jamie just said about people interacting, people from the public interacting. I was not clear exactly where you're getting the data and the information for your app and your website, and this is making me think of citizen science. Is there a possibility of having a website or a portal where anyone in the US or traveling could actually collect photos and information and have it report to a central clearinghouse and gather data to help inform this project?
It's a great idea. And Noah, you want to comment on that? Like how it would work to have a repository of data?
Sure. So the application I made is pretty extensible. Right now, how it's gathering the data is through the data sets that I've provided just from my own searching, and then also the web scraping capabilities that I built into the platform. However, there is, as you saw, an ability to upload images. I think making that widely available would be perfect and ideal, and then anybody could upload, after some human vetting, some images or videos that contain these animals and see if they have a match with one of these animals that are being trafficked or not.
They could also just report facilities too.
This as well, yes.
Thank you for that question. Christine?
Yeah, I guess I'm interested, maybe from Noah and Jamie, probably, oh, sorry, yes. Yeah, so just following on from that question, I was trying to understand where your data was coming from and what you're actually doing. So if, with the web scraping, so are you actually doing that regularly, and if so, from where? And is that sort of what Jeff was doing manually? Yeah. And then I'm curious then with, if you get the FOIA data, is the idea that those animals are they're the ones that people are allowed to have? So the idea is that if they're not those animals, that you find that they're the ones that there should be enforcement or whatever. But I guess you could also be finding other violations just by web scraping. And sorry, the last bit is I've been involved, or I am still very involved, one of the leaders of a sort of a citizen science web scraping type project. This is looking at problematic advertising on social media platforms. And what's amazing about that is that we've gone in through people's actual logins. So people have first we had a browser, now we have an app, but basically it means it's seeing it through the eyes of what individuals see when they're logged into Facebook or YouTube or TikTok or Instagram, which is quite different to what you can see, obviously, when you just go in on as without being logged in. So yeah, just extending the citizen science idea there. Anyway, that was a few questions.
No, that's great. I'll just take the part about FOIA. So even though those cats are registered, it's still highly useful for a couple of different reasons. One is it's going to be very clear photos of the unique, distinct markings, and it's going to be a couple of photos. And so those photos can be plugged in and they can use to be for training data, which is really important to fine-tune the tool with high quality data. The other thing I would say is just because those cats are legally registered, that doesn't mean they're going to stay that way. We know that things don't always work out. People go out of business. The cats go somewhere else. They are supposed to say where those cats are, and they are supposed to alert Fish and Wildlife Services if those cats are transferred immediately. However,
They don't.
they don't, right? And they're supposed to keep the documentation for the lifetime of the cat and 5 years after death or disposition. That doesn't mean they do, and it's not like they submit this stuff anywhere for the most part. They can be told by the USDA APHIS that they have to provide that information, provide copies of it. But for the most part, they're not uploading this constantly. So they're just supposed to be maintaining it. And as we talked about the issues with enforcement, it's not like USDA APHIS is like going to go check. You know, if they would, if they had the time, but they don't. So anyway.
Yeah, so it's just keeping an eye on the traffickers. And the more data we have, in the case of what we provide with NOAA's, I got a list of all the, well, we used AZA, ZA accredited zoos that had tigers, and then I got a list of all unaccredited roadside zoos that had tigers and how many were in their collection. And then the data scraping allows them to go to all those, if they have websites or if they have any social media presence, and try to grab as much content as possible. So just building a massive database is going to be going forward. I'm still looking for cats that we looked for 4 years ago. You know, I won't give it, and I found one within the last year that had been dumped from, the only exploiter still in business is out of Pennsylvania. It's Grant Kremer. It's Wild World of Animals. And he is insidious, but he's the last man standing from our film. And I caught one of the tigers we had tracked from the film, and he had dumped, and it was at a McLaughlin high school football game. And he dumped that cat at another unaccredited roadside zoo somewhere else in Pennsylvania. I was able to track the cat there. But there's a number of cats that we're still looking for. But I think it's going to be, the fear of prosecution is going to be the most powerful tool.
So I'll speak to how the data is being collected with the web scraping side of things. There are two ways you can do this. You have a human who's in the driver's seat, which is the approach I've taken, or automatically scraping, kind of how you described. The interface that I created is enabling you to speak to a chatbot very easily and direct them as to what you want to investigate more specifically. So it generates queries and then subqueries to continue going to various places. I included Facebook, Instagram, YouTube APIs as well. I'm not sure about terms of use when it comes to logging in as another user and then scraping data. I'm not a lawyer, but I took I think a safer approach legally in this case, and that's why it's optional in the application. But that's the approach I would like to take, is that you have an investigator of some sort, and they can work collaboratively on an investigation with this AI agent that has access to all of these abilities and the data that we've collected.
Yeah, and I will say also, this is not my area of expertise, either the legal component of it, nor the technical. Yeah.
We do data scrape.
No, we do not. But I will say.
I do with a pen and.
But, you know, a lot of this stuff is fair use doctrine, and this is another reason why it was really important for us to work with the professionals at Neil Gerber Eisenberg in Chicago to figure out what we could and couldn't do and steer clear of any issues.
Incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
I like to sleep at night.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Jeff, just to follow up, you said now a couple times this one guy is still standing. Can you explain how he is still standing from a legal standpoint, or why they can't shut him down?
He's not breaking the law. I mean,
He isn't.
So he's stopped taking the cats out. In fact, one of the active complaints I filed with Fish and Wildlife is a black jaguar cub or leopard cub that his people were taking out and exploiting. So that's an active investigation. But he now just takes everything, small primates and every other species out around the country in his roadside. They go all over the country. But yeah, those of you in the law profession know there's not a lot of, we're basing all of our laws and regulations primarily on property laws and regulations, not sentient creature law and regulations. So people have, I'm sure back in the 1950s, USDA was like, well, nobody's going to own lions and tigers and chimpanzees, so we're going to develop our regulations and policies and procedures around these other areas and not around that. And then the exploiters realize that, and they exploit animals for profit.
I have another question. Sorry. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on, so Joe Exotic is suing an animal sanctuary in my home state that took in some of his confiscated tigers,
Yep.
mostly because they neutered one of the
Yep.
white tigers. I was curious.
At Black Pine Animal Sanctuary.
Yep. Yeah. I was wondering, is this out of spite? Is this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So having been on the I've been threatened with my life by Crazy Joe, as a number of our team on the film were. He is all about keeping his name, it's all about ego, right? So he will sue anybody. He's mad at all the presidents for not giving him a pardon. He's mad at, he's always remaining in the press. No, I mean, really, it's whatever he can get press. And I saw the lawsuit that he filed. He's not going to get anywhere with it. They're not endangered cats. It's not the only facilities that have species that need to be saved are going to be part of the species survival plan of a legitimate use. So the SSP plans of any species, tigers, primates, and those are maintained through a stud book through generally the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. So the fact that, Black Pine is a phenomenal organization. I was there last year. Tremendous respect to all the staff there and what they're doing. He's a nonsense. He wants attention. But I have to say that I've been threatened with my life on several occasions, and it's a frightening prospect, but right's right and you can't defend wrong. So the only way we will lose this battle is through apathy, and I encourage you not to have that word in your vocabulary.
One is just request for contact info. And his animal encounters are legal WW of A.
Wide world of animal. So animal encounters there's very, very, very few regulations as far as, that's the sad thing, there's a plethora of roadside zoos and facilities. You can have an encounter, just in Florida in the last couple of months, they're opening up cafes now. You can go and there's strip store cafes opening up where you can have an animal encounter hands-on with everything from small primates to every species that's not protected under the Big Cat Public Safety Act. They don't. You can still go to Myrtle Beach Safari, and I kid you not, Myrtle Beach Safari and have full hands-on encounters with full-grown chimpanzees. Crawling on your head. How is that legal? But that's why all these animal encounters go on. And I think the last fee I saw there, Myrtle Beach Safari was charging $500 or $600 per person for the animal encounters. So you multiply that times the thousands of people, and that's where they're making all the money. And there still are. In full hands-on encounter with elephants.
Yeah, they have one Asian elephant. I think her name is Bubbles.
Yep.
And 55 tigers and a bunch of other species. And their social media is all over the place. And they have multiple accounts for each social media platform. It's not just him, it's his kids too.
His son Cody. So Cody's he's a wannabe Tarzan. So you'll see him most popular. And then the daughter.
He dresses like Tarzan. It's
Yeah.
really scary.
So we track the people and we will get them. I kid you not. They are not going to go free.
And they also have, you know how much money they're making when they're posing with really expensive cars and stuff on top of it.
They have their chimpanzees driving Lamborghinis.
Yeah. That doesn't sound like conservation, but what do I know?
So yeah, just a quick so the way, if we can't take them down with regard to animal welfare laws, our Big Cat Rescue, we took down a facility that was a smaller version of Doc Annals. It was called Dade City Wild Things. It was run by the Stearns family, and it was same thing, pay to play with tiger cubs, leopard cubs, every small primates. We couldn't get USDA violations, just kept on operating. But we went after them with their charity fundraising tactics. And the Stearns family had another side business, was agriculture, and we were able to shut them down through proving that they were deceptive fundraising and illegal fundraising. So we have to utilize all the tools to go after these exploiters, because they're going to be utilizing all the tools to exploit the animals. And they're out of business. They shipped some of their tigers to Joe Exotic. We actually took over Joe Exotic's property through bankruptcy and sold the property while he's in federal prison.
Joan?
Just a really sort of small, dumb question, I guess, but I'm thinking about jaguars. And I don't know a lot about jaguars, but they're all black, right?
No.
Okay,
So
they're
jaguars
not.
are just like
Because I was
leopards.
trying to think, depending on the species, how easy it's going to be.
Yeah, so here's a really cool thing. So jaguars and leopards will be black, and they'll be the golden. And the really cool thing, the easiest way to determine, there's a different shape to the skull, but the easiest way is that leopard spots are pretty singular spots, patterns of spots. The jaguars are like a rosette within a rosette. Their spots are like a rosette within a rosette. So it's a different spot marking, a different shape of the spot. Yeah. So it'll be very identifiable through AI.
I think very similar to that, I recently learned that lions, you can tell by their nose spots which one is which. And I think we're going to see that for most of the cats.
Shape of the nose.
Yeah, the only ones that I was unsure about were the mountain lions, I think. But
it's tough.
But most of these cats have very recognizable
markings. Yeah, so the mountain lions will all have spots when they're younger, and then they lose the spots as they age. So it's going to be more difficult to track them. But again, shape of face, shape of nose, different, when I was working with the Texas wildlife officials, sometimes it's not what's similar, you look for what's different. So when I was tracking the cartel tiger from Mexican cartel into Texas, what ended up being a slam dunk was, it wasn't the similar stripes, it was what was different. So sometimes in security, you look for what's different and stood out.
So this is a little bit different than what you're trying to do, but I'm wondering whether AI is going to be able to help us better understand who animals are, not just by like what they look like, but also maybe by their behaviors. So we know better like when they're in pain or suffering or needing something. And so I know that in research, people used to think mice didn't feel pain because they couldn't observe any reactions to painful stimuli until they slowed down, they videotaped them and then slowed down the speed of the playback, and then they could see very, very clearly. And they have like 10 responses now that they know to look for in the mice. And so I'm wondering if you think we actually might be able to learn more about these animals and other animals while we're also looking at just try to identify them, but to understand them better.
I think so. And one of our other speakers at this conference is Oliver Bendel. And he actually had a project called the Animal Whisperer Project. If you're familiar with it, I believe there were 3 species, dogs, horses, and cows, I think. And what they were doing is identifying body language, so position of ears and all of this stuff. And the point was to determine the mood of that animal. It could be used if you're out, hiking or something and you come across some animals and they're like, okay, that body posture says, get the heck away from me, like whatever it is. The interesting thing about that study was that it was most difficult to predict behavior in dogs because dogs have all these different ear shapes. And so it wasn't consistent, whereas like a horse and a cow. But yeah, I think that we would be able to do that. I think it's already getting started, so.
So I'm wondering if we should add that component to this, because we'd also be able to say, so this is the lion or the cheetah or whatever, and they're in pain. They're suffering, right? So when we're to build the legal case, right, against them, so not only are they being exploited because we're asking them to do something they're not supposed to do, but we can actually see physiologically that there's an adverse effect.
Yeah, and I think when we were collaborating with one of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife officers, these investigative people are looking for forensic evidence. They want blood samples. And as Jamie explained to them, but this is going to be one of your tools to get you there. So I think that's a great add-on, is that we'll have, the more data we collect, the more that they'll have to put in their case.
Lonely lions and testy tigers. Yes.
Well, I guess the only question I have, though, is how do we know when we're taking, at any moment, we're taking the picture of what they're feeling or to attach it to what they're seeing.
So I
what
can
we're
speak to
seeing.
that. I think it's a huge challenge in this space to make those kinds of models. You need very specific data. You need it to be labeled very well. I know that there are a lot of people working on this. Sam from Open Pause, for example, I know that he has a few models that, or at least some projects that have been done for some nonprofits that kind of tackle this issue. But I agree, it's a hard problem. I think that there's enough people interested in working on it that we will get there, but it's going to take a while for it to be really practical.
And if I could just leave you with something is again, the only way we lose a battle is through apathy. If you see something, say something. There are a number of online reporting agencies overseas as well. There's some really excellent ones where if you collect content, you can submit the content. I was pleased for a while until recently with Fish and Wildlife. They had an online crime reporting tool. And so you could, within 30 seconds, you could fill out that whole form. But the flaw in the form was you couldn't provide content, right? You could just describe what you'd seen, what you're complaining, what the complaint is about. No tool to supply pictures or video. So every time I'd file a case, I'd also call the 800 number, the same crime reporting. So when I called 3 months ago, I had a wonderful representative, and she told me, well, all we're handling is poaching cases. I said, well, that's not the last 3 years. I've been submitting cases both virtually as well as on the line. She says, yep, that's the way it used to be, and our resources have been totally cut back, so we're taking all the calls, and all we're handling is poaching. So again, it goes back to, it's going to change politically, but I mean, if you see something, say something. There are tools to report it, and the only way that we lose is if you don't report it.
If there are no other questions, I think we can go to break and be back at 3:15. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.